So you ready to roll?
Let's do it.
All right. Why don't I'm actually curious to hear about it since Andrew told you to do it. So you watch the Unbreakable Split Glass trilogy,
Yep.
which starts with Unbreakable with Sam Jackson and Bruce Willis, right? Yeah.
Yes. So I watched it in a different order based on, I guess, chronologically.
The Splits first,
Technically,
right?
no. So Unbreakable came out first. That came
Well,
out in,
yeah,
I guess,
it
what,
released first,
2000?
yeah.
That came out first. That came out in 2000. And then Split came out, I want to say, what, 2016, 2017. And then Glass came out in 2019. So I actually watched Split first. Andrew recommended all three of these, so thank you, Andrew, for recommending because I it's been on my list for a while now, and I finally decided to turn it on and watch them. So first came Split that I watched, right? That came out in 2016, and I think the reason I was wanting to watch it was because I've been watching Anya Taylor Joy in so
Oh yeah, I
many
forgot she's in that,
good
right?
pieces. This is apparently like what put her on the map. I've seen her in Menu, which came out like
Hmm.
2 years ago, I think in 2022. I've really liked her in that. And then first time I ever knew who she was The Queen's Gambit, which was very popular at the end of
Yep.
2020.
Yep.
That was like peak COVID when you're really diving in and immersing yourself into new shows. So I really enjoyed her performance in that. So I was like, where did she get her start and stuff? And I know Andrew had spoken about her in the past, and I had seen that she was in that film and she is one of the main characters there. So wanted to give that a whirl. And for those of you who don't know, Split is about uh, an individual played by James McAvoy who has DID, which is essentially a multiple personality disorder.
Hmm.
And he kidnaps Anya Taylor-Joy's character Casey along with two other women after a birthday party, and he takes them to a basement, and his, each of his personality comes up, and I believe he has like over 20 personalities. And I I didn't love it, I'll be honest with you, but he acted the hell out of his
He
character.
was
He was
great.
so good. Yeah, he was really good. Just to go from like the first guy who has like really bad OCD to even a female personality where he's like in heels and is talking like a woman to Hedrick, who's like that very childlike 9-year-old boy. And Casey, who's the main character, female character, who's played by Anya Taylor-Joy, she just like connects with him in more like a trauma bond type of way, where she feels like his pain. And you find out later in the film that the reason why he developed this DID, multiple personality disorder, is because of trauma that he experienced from abuse from his mother,
Hmm.
which was tragic. And you find out Anya Taylor-Joy is a victim of sexual assault and abuse from her uncle. So in that way, they connect. And as this movie's going on, you they go back and forth between him and then the therapist. The therapist then goes to she feels like something's really off with him. Kevin is the name
Hmm.
of the individual who James McAvoy plays, but he has different personality names. He's got Barry, he's got um, Hedrick, he's got I think Patricia is like the female, but they have very and Dennis is like the bad one who has OCD who ended up kidnapping the three girls in the first place, and all these personalities will come out, and he has like different accents for each one, which is he just crushed it at
Hmm.
that role. Like really, you feel like this guy is like totally, you know, has no control of his body whatsoever, and these personalities will come out. And the personality that they're waiting for is this supervillain called the Beast, and he's the one that has these cannibalistic traits where he essentially eats his victims. So at this point, he's holding these three women hostage. Casey is trying to figure out like what's up with this guy, and she talks and bonds with a few of the personalities and is able to figure out that this guy is has multiple personality disorder. And then between that and the therapist who gives her like basically what brings him out of the personality is when you like say his full name.
Hmm.
So like Kevin Wendell Crumb, like that kind of brings him back to a state with Kevin. And I mean, at the end of the film, she's able to do that. And the beast ends up sparing her life, Casey, because of all the wounds he sees and beatings and scratches and everything on her body from her own sexual abuse that he, I think, resonates with her and spares her life. So that's fascinating. Watch that first. I mean, overall, I didn't love it. I thought it was fine. I thought he, like acting wise, this was a
Hmm.
great film for acting, but I wasn't like, I don't know. I thought like given a hostage situation, I just thought it was not the best. Personally, I just didn't really love it, but also a bit unbelievable that the therapist went to her home by herself, knowing that this is someone that's a big risk with this mental disorder. I think that was a little bit unbelievable to me that she didn't get like the authorities involved. So that I think also was one of the reasons why I didn't love it. Anya Taylor-Joy, you could just tell how well she acted in
Yeah.
this. Haley Lou Richardson plays one of the other girls, and she's in White Lotus,
Hmm.
5 Feet Apart, and some other good content out there as well. But overall, actually was my least favorite out of the three. I then watched Unbreakable, which is really the first one that came out in 2000, and that's with Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson.
And
And
Bruce Willis shows up at the very end of Split too, doesn't he? Didn't he walk into like
he does
the
the
diner or
diner.
whatever?
Yeah, when they gave, well, I guess they show on television Kevin Wendell Crumb's, I guess, who he is and that he committed a crime at the zoo, which we find out that this basement is in a zoo and
Hmm.
his father worked at a zoo. We find that out at the end. And it's pretty wild where he comes back in, but I didn't know anything about Bruce Willis's character until I watched the first film, which I watched afterwards, which is Unbreakable, came out in 2000. And he's the superhero. He's
Hmm.
this guy who survives a train crash where there are hundreds of people, and he's the only person who survives, not a scratch, not a bruise. He just, it's almost like he just went unconscious and then he wakes up in the hospital and everyone's in awe, like, how is he the only survivor and not a scratch on him? So that comes to, I guess at that point he figures out like this is odd and maybe more just a coincidence, but then he is speaking with his wife who is played by Robin Wright and he asks, I don't think I've been sick like in the years that we've been together. So he becomes suspicious of his own capabilities. I thought the scene where his son is putting weight onto the bar and he keeps on adding and
Hmm.
he's still like without really any trepidation is able to continuously like lift the bar with weights. And yeah, at this point, he's like questioning, like, okay, do I have some supernatural capabilities? He then meets Samuel L. Jackson, who is someone that has brittle bones disease, who is quite the opposite. He is very breakable and has a very brilliant mind and is really into comic books. And he meets David Dunn and he convinces David Dunn, like, you're something special. You're truly unbreakable. And you get to learn more about their personalities. And then he puts on this, well, I guess they call him what, the overseer. That's his like superhero name over time. And he starts saving people, and it's crazy like when he starts like making contact with people just from touch, seeing that some of these individuals that he's touching have committed pretty major crimes, rape, robbery, everything of that nature. And he starts really taking care of the community. And his normal job is at a football stadium as a security guard. So up until that point, I actually thought it was pretty fascinating. I mean, it's a 2000s movie, so obviously the special effects aren't up to par as like you would see in Split and then
Yeah.
later in Glass. But I thought it was good. I liked it. I really did. And then the twist at the end with Samuel L. Jackson pretty much admitting that he was responsible for the train accident that killed all those people.
to test him, right? Wasn't that why like you knew it would? Yeah.
Yeah, at the end. I thought it was like kind of not a shitty ending, but I was just like, that's it. Like he just admits that because they become very close, and he has this fascination, Samuel L. Jackson, with just superheroes and comics to the point where it's like this is more than just an obsession. Like this is literally what he lives for, I think, just to prove to people that there are superheroes in the world. And the fact that he puts matters into his own hands to, commit such crimes in order to find a superhero is pretty sick.
And his thinking was that if somebody like him exists who is so fragile
Breakable.
and frail, that somebody
Yeah,
should be on the opposite end of the spectrum. Yeah.
correct. It's an interesting concept. But I mean, even just in the beginning of the credits with the comics, like the different facts about comics of how widespread comics are and what the actual readership looks like every single year, etc. And after watching that, I'm like, how are they going to blend the two into the movie Glass? Because that's the third film
Hmm.
where they have a combination of characters from both Split as well as from Unbreakable come together. And I said, one's really about comic books, and the other one's really about like mental illness, honestly, like mental illness and a lot of just trauma. But they did a really good job. And I don't know if, I mean, these are all M. Night Shyamalan films. So I don't know if he just write all of these and then was like, let me make a third movie, or did he just make a movie and then just solely based on the content he had from the other three or the other two, shall I say? That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, I don't know what the plan was for the third one. I don't know why the two universes would cross. I mean that I guess they're in the same universe, but you know, other than
Yeah,
being supremely evil, the Kevin Wendell Crumb character.
right.
I mean, I guess he's kind of a supervillain, but the real villain, the whole point is Glass, right? And I think
Correct.
it was called Glass, but I it's been a while since I watched it, but I felt like James McAvoy had more screen time than Sam Jackson did in that movie.
A little bit. Yeah. So Sam Jackson is Mr. Glass. That was the name that they gave him. They each
Hmm.
have their own like suit. Is it pseudonym or just whatever their own like superhero name or name that they were given? So uh, the overseer is Bruce Willis's character, David Dunn. Kevin Wendell Crumb, who is played by James McAvoy. His, I guess, villain name is called the Horde for all the personalities that he has. And then Samuel L. Jackson, his real name is, or his character's name is Elijah, but his, I guess, name that he goes by is Mr. Glass because of how fragile he is with his brittle bones disease and such. So it brings all of them together. And like the beginning scene where Bruce Willis's character, first of all, I love the fact that they brought his son back years later, like 20, almost, well, almost like 15, 20 years later, like adult version of his son from that film.
The
Love
same
that.
actor too, right?
Same
Yeah.
actor. And he has them like working together as if like as if one's Batman and the other one is like Alfred and like behind the scenes. It seems like his son that is like giving him like from like a walkie-talkie and just behind like in a basement, or I don't know about a basement, but it's like they have their own layer where he's like trying to scout out crime and helping his father. I'm like, that's pretty dope. I love that duo. So that was pretty cool. I really enjoyed. I think Glass was my favorite. I love how they blended it all together. How Sarah Paulson crushed it as this like crazy medical professional or psychologist who's trying to convince these guys that they're not actually superheroes, and how Mr. Glass, aka Samuel L. Jackson, is trying to prove her wrong. Like, no, like we all have special capabilities. And the whole reason he did this was to prove a point that there cannot be any evil without superheroes. They all must all coexist, right? And then how about the twist at the end where he's responsible for both Kevin Wendell Crumb's multiple personality disorder with putting his father on the train. And then, well, he didn't actually put him on the train, but the fact that he was on that train that same day, you find out at the end, coupled with the fact that Bruce Willis's character, David Dunn, was on the train as the only survivor. had Samuel L. Jackson not existed, he would have never created that villain, that superhero. So he's
Hmm.
like actually the real villain at the end of the day. And they each have one person in their lives from like their own individual stories. Elijah has his mother. Casey, for some reason, almost like has Stockholm syndrome, who's like now obsessed with Kevin Wendell Crumb after he spared her life. And she's like, I want to help him. And then David Dunn, the overseer, has his son. So pretty crazy at the end how they all like have that massive fight in the parking lot
Hmm.
just to showcase, and then he films it all.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Glass
How they
does,
find
right?
out at the end. Glass films it all. He like connects all of the cameras so that this can be filmed. And then you find out at the end, Sarah Paulson's like main objective was like to kind of dispose of all three of them because they don't want the world to find out about these supernatural powers that
Hmm.
people have. So loved it. I really enjoyed Glass a lot. I didn't know how it was going to be with blending the two initial films, but I thought they did a great job. I really applaud M. Night Shyamalan for providing this type of story that I have never seen before. And I'm not someone who like loves superhero films, so I enjoyed it. I really did. I like how he laid the ground. I think he just has a very creative mind when it comes
Hmm.
to what he puts on
Yeah,
screen.
I've always thought that Shyamalan probably puts too much pressure on himself to have that like crazy twist ending, and that's what bites a
Sure.
lot of his movies. Historically, is that he did such a great job with The Sixth Sense, and even what was the one after that with Nicole Kidman, that they were in the house and turns out she killed the kids. I don't. I'll remember it later, I'm sure. But anyways, he started off with some great twists, and then he put so much pressure on himself since to have a twist in every single movie. And and I think if he would ease up on himself, he'd be better off because he is
The
really
Others.
the
It's
others.
The
Yeah,
Others. I never saw it, but
is really good.
good to know.
Um, uh,
2001.
yeah, he's really creative, and I thought
Hmm.
Unbreakable. I don't even think that I realized when I started watching it to when I got to the end of it that it was a superhero movie until you really start to think about what's happening.
Right.
And it was such a cool, different take on the superhero genre before, actually, well before it was what it is now. I mean, there was the X-Men,
Right.
a few others, but it certainly wasn't what it is today. And I
Totally.
think he did a really great job with it. I thought it was really cool.
Totally. Yeah, I'm really happy I finally got to watch the trilogy because I mean, I know Split got a lot of positive attention based on just how well James McAvoy acted in that. And I always
Hmm.
knew, like, I heard about it, I was like, it's about James McAvoy playing a character who's crazy that holds hostage three different women. He's got DID, but I never actually saw it.
Mm.
And it was the one I liked least out of the three films. I thought Glass was the best, just how they blended everything. I really enjoyed it. Unbreakable is definitely a classic, and it shows Bruce Willis's character as a hero. I
Hmm.
was upset when he died in the third one.
Yeah, yeah, you
When
really don't expect him to.
no, I'm like, this guy's gonna make it through, and then I felt really bad for his son. I'm like, the son lost the mother and the father. Like, why'd you do this to the kid?
Yeah, yeah,
But it kind of goes with the theme, like they must coexist, like evil and superheroes have to coexist. If there's no bad, then there's no reason to have like a superhero.
yeah. So cool. Well, for anybody that wants to do the same thing, they've made it very complicated on the streaming services because none of these movies are on the same streaming service.
They're not.
So Unbreakable is on Max, Split's on Hulu, and Glass is on Netflix. Uh,
Yes.
and so if you feel like jumping in and watching all three in any particular order, that's where you can find them. But yeah, it actually sounds like a lot of fun. If I have time this week, I might just do it. It's been a while since I've seen any of them. Um, and I think I remember really enjoying all of them. So I would definitely watch them all again.
All three of them have very good acting. I will say that.
Hmm.
Very good acting. I mean, James McAvoy specifically just playing all of those different personalities is quite interesting to see on screen and how quickly he changes and transitions from one personality to another. But even just like the origins of Anya Taylor-Joy in film too.
Mhm. Cool. Well, since I was going to do Abigail next, but since we're on the superhero bend, I will talk about Supacell, which is over on Netflix. Um,
So,
it is a 6 or 8 episode series. I think it's only 6 episodes on Netflix. They're an hour long, and the gist of this story, it's a superhero story of its own, where uh, it takes place um, kind of in the mean streets of London. Um, it's modern times. I didn't realize it from the advertisements and stuff, but it definitely leans into kind of modern gang life in London. That's like maybe a third of the story. So I think there's 5 characters that are the like the main characters of the story. But what happens is out of the blue, they each kind of start developing powers, and you don't know why. And I don't think I want to say why. If anybody wants to watch it, I don't want to give it away because it's actually kind of brilliant, the reason that they get them. Um, so every character that gets these powers is a black character. As a matter of fact, I think it's across the board. It's a pretty much a black cast. I think there's only a couple of white actors in there, and um, I think it's fantastic for representation to be able to put something out that is like that did this well, because I think it did relatively well streaming wise, and I think it's at least in line to get a second season. I don't think they've announced it yet. But the show's still 100% on Rotten Tomatoes from the critics and
yeah,
74 from the audience.
I was gonna say
Um,
that's fantastic.
and so yeah, it's really trippy. And the description, even on Rotten Tomatoes, says in South London, a group of normal people suddenly develop superpowers, and the only apparent connection between them is that they're all black. Um, what we start to find out is there are other threads pulling these people together. Um,
Right,
but it really turns into a traditional superhero story, even though it has this kind of darker, heavier undertone to it because of the whole gang violence angle, because of you know
right.
who some of these people are. And of course, as we come to find out as the show goes on, there's a bigger, like, bad organization kind of behind this that's trying to stop them. These They come together because our main character, the guy that feels like the main character in the first episode, each of the 6 episodes kinds of focuses on a different character. So even though he's the main character in the first one, he's not the main character in all of them, but he feels like our main character. And his first experience is he accidentally jumps forward in time, and he sees
Mm.
himself and the 4 other characters fighting off these other 5 characters. And because he shows up, the future version of him sees himself and grabs him and pulls him off to the side and tells him, "Hey, this all started because your girlfriend got killed." And he
Mm.
takes her, or sorry, he takes himself, his past self, to her grave site. And so now he knows the day she's going to die. And I guess the gist of the story is, if him and these other 4 people don't stop whatever's coming
Mm.
where he jumped to, um, it's going to be like Armageddon, like it's going to be the end of the world. And so he jumps back in time, back to himself, and now he's got all this, kind of knowledge in his head. So he's got to try and stop whatever's coming. He's got to try and find these people that he doesn't know. Like, he doesn't know these people at all. And so he's got to find these other 4 people, get them all to work together so that they can then face down this, big bad organization. And
Right.
that is complicated in and of itself because, like I said, he's a delivery driver, but he lives a good life. His girlfriend is, I don't remember what she does for work, but they both make a decent amount of money. They live in a nice flat, like everything. they have a nice life. They're just happy people. You've got another girl who is a nurse, so like her life is okay, but she has a roommate who is dating a gangster that is like really bad and abusive to the roommate. So there's some drama there. You've got another kid that is he's not well off or anything, but he's selling weed in town, and he is becoming successful at that. So he's kind of in that arena. And then you have another kid that's just flat out um, a gang member, and
And none of these people know each other?
none of these people initially know each other. So
Okay,
he's got to bring them all together, and
interesting.
it's really fascinating. It's really fun, and I think um, I say really fun. It's a darker series. Like there's not a lot of comedy and joy in it.
Right.
Um, but it's really interesting. And I think, when I think of London, being an American, like I just think about people just walking around in their long coats and their top hats all damn day. Like London is just like, nice fancy people. I forget that you've got different parts of London, just like you do with any other city.
Sure.
And there's a whole, uh, less well-off population, a gang population, all this stuff.
Hmm.
And so it's kind of an interesting look. Like it makes you look at this side um, of a city that you kind of don't think of in that way. Like I said, as an American, I don't think of it
Sure.
that way. Um, and
And they're all in South London?
mhm,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, and it's good. It's really interesting. I think, like I said, there is a really neat twist that explains why they have their powers. And,
Okay.
and funny enough, Andrew has a friend named Hockey who was posting on Facebook, or Andrew posted on Facebook, and Hockey responded to it and said how they got their powers. So it was kind of spoiled for me, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool," but I wish I didn't know because it would have felt
Right.
more. So that's probably actually the biggest reason that I'm not just giving it away,
Okay.
because I think it's neat. And then, like, if somebody's watching and they figure it out, because they do telegraph it a little bit, like they kind of say
Hmm.
things that push you towards knowing it before it happens. But I usually I pick up on that stuff, and I did not pick up on it, or I don't think I would
Interesting.
have picked up on it if I didn't already know. Um,
Gotcha. Whereas if you were to watch it a second time, it would kind of all fall into place and
yeah, you can
yeah,
definitely see those Easter eggs lined up for you. Um,
cool.
but yeah, it's really good, and as a superhero show, it's fun. Like he uses a lot of typical like superhero powers. One guy is really
Yeah.
fast. Our main character, he can stop time and
Hmm.
travel through time. You've got one guy can turn himself invisible. The one girl, she can move things with her mind.
Hmm.
There's one more person, and I think he's just strong.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, it's really good. Like I definitely recommend it. Especially talking about things like Unbreakable and Split. It's not a crazy like let's go out and get our costumes and be all Marvel
Right.
superhero-y, which I love. It is a very real world kind of superhero show, and it's not like the world is teeming with superheroes. There's a handful of
Hmm.
people with these powers, and as we come to find out as the show goes on, there's some not great people with powers too. And
Sort of like the
so
boys.
sort of, yeah, yeah. But less over the top. Like this is really just, you know,
Sure.
there's a dude in a gang that's trying to do good things and has powers, but there's a guy in another gang that's bad and has power. Um,
Right.
and yeah, it's just it is really good, and to see these relationships and the different types of people, and then to see them come together. Um, where it ends, like I feel like I would almost tell people to wait until it gets a season two to watch it, because like the ending would
Interesting.
really suck if there's not a second season. But it's
Uh,
but it's so good that I would say watch it, especially to get the numbers up so that Netflix has a reason to do a second season.
okay.
Um, but the ending would be a bummer if they don't get a second season. Like it doesn't end in like a perfect happy place, and it definitely leaves things hanging. So
Now,
there's
do they
more
have an
story
all
to tell.
British cast, Kevin, or
Hmm.
do you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know if the actors are all from London. Um, it felt like it, and it looked like it was filmed in London.
Yeah.
So my assumption is they are all
Yeah, it looks
British.
like I'm like clicking on them now just from what's on Google. It looks like they're all British actress, British actor. Calvin Dembra is an English actor. Yeah, it
Yeah,
looks
and
like
that was the
they,
other thing that was really great too. I didn't recognize anybody in this.
yeah.
So I don't think I'd seen any of these people before, and they all were all really great. This the one guy that's kind of like the head bad guy. His name is Eddie Marson. I've seen him in
Hmm.
other stuff, and he kind of always plays a slimy bad guy. Um,
I've seen this
and
guy. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, he I've seen before. But
He's in Back to
otherwise,
Black. He plays the father in Back to Black.
okay, yeah, 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 yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So definitely I recommend going and watching Supercell. Like I said, it's rated great on Rotten Tomatoes. I think it's pretty solid on IMDb. Every
Yeah,
episode is good. Um, I think going in understanding what it is, I probably would have got into it a little faster. I
sure,
expected a little more kind of superhero actiony stuff based on the description of it, and it starts off much slower. Like it's definitely building the characters and things they go through,
sure,
and it's much more about the complexities of their lives and the things they're doing, and then them trying to come together than it is about them just being heroes. Like they're not just out there saving the day all day, every day. Uh,
yeah,
and
nice,
and it's people that definitely did not ask for this. Like they're not people, they're not Captain America who was like, I want to save the day, go do this thing. These people, if they had their way, they definitely would not have had any kind of powers. Like they would just be normal people. So definitely
cool.
worth checking out.
Yeah, no, it looks like a good series for sure, and hopefully they come out with the second
Yeah, I
season.
hope so. I think from what I saw, the creator really would like to do 3 seasons. So if he gets his way, he'll do all 3 seasons, and um
Nice,
it'll be all buttoned up. So hopefully he gets those because it was solid.
good,
So all right,
awesome.
you have two other things, so you can just pick one and roll.
Sure. Let's go with a film that I saw a couple of weeks ago. It's called The Only Living Boy in New York, and it came up on, it's on Amazon Prime. It was recommended to me, so thought I'd give it a whirl. And main character is played by Callum Turner, who was in Boys in the Boat, and
Hmm.
I enjoyed his performance in that. So this came out in 2017, and it's about a young college-aged guy named Thomas who's living in New York City, and he's trying to find his way in life as a writer and getting through his college years. And he falls for like a friend of his named Mimi, but it seems like she's not really interested in him, and comes to find like he's just a very normal guy, and he realizes a lot of women want someone that's unpredictable. So that's something that he's like coming to terms with. Like, I'm just kind of, you know, your normal guy. I'm not exciting. And he comes back one day in his to his apartment in East Village. And this is a guy that grew up like fairly wealthy in the Upper West Side. And as he comes back to the East Village, he meets this older gentleman who's played by Jeff Bridges, who also happens to be a writer. And he becomes friends with this neighbor of his. And his neighbor is trying to ask, like, like, are you happy? And you don't seem that happy. And what can you do to make your life more exciting? Like, put yourself out there more. So he ends up hanging out with this love interest of his, Mimi, one day, and he comes from a good family on the Upper West Side. He's got a mother, and then he's got his father. Mother's played by Cynthia Nixon. Father's played by Pierce Brosnan, excuse me. And he's out at a club one night with this girl Mimi, and he sees his father out on the lower floor. He's above, like a few floors above, and he sees his father. And then this woman by the name of Johanna comes in, who's like a woman who's like 20 years younger than him, and starts kissing and like leaning in on him. And he's like, who is this woman that's like with my father? This woman, Johanna, is played by Kate Beckinsale. And he comes to learn that his father's cheating on his mother with a younger woman. That after finding out about this, he's he's horrified because he thinks his parents have like a wonderful relationship. He's like he just doesn't understand why his father would do such a thing. So he follows his father one day and he ends up seeing in the morning. He goes to his father and waits outside his office. His father is like a big time publisher of a company that publishes books and works with authors and such. And he sees Johanna, his mistress, leave. And he's just curious, like why his father would even like dabble in something like this, and why would this woman even want to be with her father, his father, even though like he's very wealthy. He's just out of curiosity. So he starts following Kate Beckinsale's character Johanna, and you come to find that he starts developing feelings for this woman and an attraction for her. And he runs into her, and he finally comes face to face with her. And she's like, "I know who you are. You're the son of Ethan Webb." And he's just so fascinated by her, and they end up connecting again at a wedding. And he ends up hooking up with Johanna. And at that point, it puts her in like a weird position because she has to choose between the father and the son. And as all this is going on, and this is where it gets like really weird, he hangs out with his neighbor, that older gentleman who he finds is a recovering alcoholic. The guy is played by Jeff Bridges. And this alcoholic neighbor's telling him, like, yeah, live the life, go and, live on the edge a little bit, hang out with this woman, this mistress, and whatnot, make your life more exciting. And while this is all going on, like his mother's going through severe depression and you see her not doing so great. And honestly, at that point, I just was kind of like, this movie is really unbelievable. I just can't. Like, I'm gonna finish and see what happens, but it's just so. I just don't think most men would be like, or college age or guys would be like, yeah, I want to sleep with my father's mistress. It's so weird to me. And as this is all going on, you learn more about his neighbor, the older neighbor. And I'll just spoil the end because I just don't see it's a waste of your time. Um, the you find out and you see Johanna, the mistress, spoils it, and she's like, "Yeah, you know that man who lives in your building? He's your dad.
Like
He's your
his real
biological
dad.
father, his real dad, his biological father." And the mother's depressed because she only, I guess, at this point in time, she, I think, only tried to make things right. But Pierce Brosnan is not even his father, and he's just like not like the best dad either. He doesn't have the closest relationship with Thomas, who Colin Turner plays. And at this point, you're just like, this is so outrageous. What is the likelihood that this guy lives in the same building as his son? And this is like a very weird way to say, I'm not your father. Um, I, like as in Pierce Brosnan, like they've been keeping the secret for all these years, but your real father is kind of an alcoholic who writes stories, and he wrote a story called The Only Living Boy in New York. It's about you. And it's just it's like it was a little dragged down, a little crazy, all just to find out. It's a movie about just how corrupt like a wealthy family could be. I shouldn't say corrupt, but just how there's always just things that need to be untangled, and how there's like deep, dark family secrets. And yeah, that I just I don't know. I didn't really like it. I thought it was like I mean, it's sort of a drama, but there's a lot of funny parts within it too. But
Okay.
I also was like, why did they make this film? I just thought it was silly.
Yeah, it's interesting. It got destroyed by the critics on
Yeah,
Rotten
because it
Tomatoes. It's like a
sucked. Sorry.
33%.
Yeah, it was terrible. It was
Yeah.
terrible. But it has a good cast. That's the thing. It has a
Yeah,
good
like I
cast.
was
So
looking at the cast. The cast is great, and the director, he did 500 Days of Summer, which is a super
a
fun
big hit.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that one, which has kind of a down weird ending too. It's not like just a total happy ending at the end of 300 Days of Summer. Um,
Yeah.
so he's got a style. I mean, the only thing I could say about him wanting to date his dad's mistress is that it's Kate Beckinsale.
Yeah. I mean, other than
she's
that,
she's very
she's great.
pretty.
She is very
Um,
pretty.
but yeah, otherwise it's super weird. Um, I yeah, I don't know. Like I said, the like, and you said it, the cast is amazing. Like,
It's a
uh,
good cast.
yeah,
It just was like a ridiculous movie. I thought it was a ridiculous movie, and I was like, oh great, it's about a writer trying to find himself. Like I just stayed with it, and then once he starts sleeping with the mistress, Kate Beckinsale, I was like, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. So
it looks like it's a short watch too. It's only 90 minutes.
it's very short, but save yourself. It wasn't that great. I was like, all right, cool. Because there are some films that Amazon has recommended to me that I've liked, and there's
Mhm.
some that I have not liked. And I guess they haven't really like matched my like exact algorithm of like what I'd like yet. But it's still buffering. But
Yeah,
I thought I'd give it a shot. Why not? And yeah, it was super unbelievable and like very ridiculous and not worth the 90 minutes of my time. And probably yours as well. So, yeah, unless you want to see like Kate Beckinsale look beautiful, which you could probably just do on your own by Googling her or going to
yeah,
her IMDb, don't watch it.
that is fair. All right. Well, going to sticking with shows or things that I don't know could have been better, I guess. Um, so the show Bodies was recommended to me by someone in Andrew's feed, and I'll have to look it up and see who it was, because I
Okay.
feel bad that I don't remember. Um, I started it a while ago, and I watched the first episode, and then I forgot to go back to it. So, not because it was bad,
Hmm.
but just I forgot for whatever reason. And I mean, all in all, it's not a bad show. Andrew and I talked a couple weeks ago about Dark Matter on Apple TV. And Dark
Hmm.
Matter isn't a time travel show, but it's a show about um, alternate realities and how you can travel to any other reality with this magic box. Bodies
Hmm.
is really interesting. The first episode is a little confusing, but rightly so. I forget which timeline starts first. I think it opens up in modern day. So it opens up in 2023. This
Hmm.
woman, she's the character's Middle Eastern, um, and she is working in London as apparently I'm spending all my time in London for TV. Um, and there's this funky like power surge and a bunch of lights go off and she
Hmm.
sees something down an alley and she walks down this alley and she finds a body of a naked man with a tattoo on his hand and like his eye is missing. And so she finds him and then it immediately shifts back to 1890 and there's an detective inspector deputy inspector um doing the same thing. He's walking his beat. He walks into this back alley and finds the exact same body. So
That's weird.
yeah, and then some storyline stuff happens. We jump to 1941. I don't know why it went in the order that it did, but it jumps to 1941. We find this other cop
Hmm.
that's in this alley. He has been sent to this alley to clean something up by somebody. It's the same body. So there's three bodies
That's
in
weird.
the body in three different times. So now the majority of the show, I think this is 8 episodes, I want to say. And the first 6 episodes are now dedicated to each of these three people trying to solve this crime in their own time. Like they don't have a way to communicate with each other. They don't know that the other one's working on it. They've never seen anything about it. And
Hmm.
so, it's all about the way these stories start to wind together. And oh, and at the very end of the first episode, it jumps into the future again. So 20, 30 years, I think. So it's like 2050 something. And there's a cop walking her beat. She finds the body again. So this
Hmm.
fourth body shows up. So we have four different timelines in this show. But when she finds the body, he wakes up. So he's still alive. He's the only one that's still alive. And
Yikes.
yeah, and so it starts off this chain of events where we start to find out that this is all being orchestrated by somebody who traveled through time to do this stuff. And it starts to get a little funky. It starts to if I know it's not your jam, but if you ever watch Avengers Endgame, um
Okay.
Avengers
The five
Endgame,
hour movie.
that's 3 hours, I
I'm
think.
just kidding.
It's long. If you watch it the right way and watch it with Infinity War, then it's like 5.5 hours. Um,
Okay.
but they
Hmm.
talk about time travel, and they talk about time travel like time travel for you is always linear. So if you come back to the same place, it's not back to the future where somebody disappears, or if you change the past, things
Sure.
change, and like your timeline is always your timeline. So even if you go
Hmm.
back and change something, you're changing an alternate reality. You're not changing your own timeline, right? Yours is always
The
what it would
same.
be. This show, and to me, that makes sense. That makes more sense than this. This one, when you start putting together the story and the way people are moving through it,
Hmm.
like just it shouldn't be possible. Not because of the science of time travel. Like you can just make that up and make that work whatever you want in a story. There's just people that shouldn't exist that do because of choices that were made because they time traveled to the past, but now they
Right.
exist in the future because they went like really weird. And then, when they start changing things, when they start doing things in the past, you see things start to change in the present or disappear in the present. And it's just like if they can change these things and undo these things, then the whole show shouldn't have happened. And like it's like 8 episodes of kind of why did this even happen in the first place? So like as far as payoff goes and some of the deeper like hows and whys, it's
Hmm.
a little problematic, but overall, as far as the show goes, it's really intriguing in the way they do, tie some of this stuff together is really great. The acting is fantastic. I've heard of Amaka Okafor before. She's the main, like
Person.
our timeline person. Um, the body, the guy that plays the body, and then we kind of see him alive later on. His name is Tom Mothersdale. He looks like Tom Hiddleston's brother almost.
Hmm.
And then the kind of the main bad-ish guy is played by Stephen Graham, who I think, if I'm not mistaken, was in Snatch a bajillion years ago, which I love that movie. And I haven't seen
Hmm.
him in a ton of stuff, but I like him. And this is a very like in Snatch, he's kind of like the bumbling sidekick, and he's great at it.
Sure.
In this, he's definitely like a mature, intelligent, strong character, and he plays it great. So, as far as the acting and the directing and all that stuff, it's really well made. Like it's worth watching. It's just that some of the things get kind of jumbled, and they're kind of even though it's about time travel, they become a little unbelievable. So it lost me a little bit in there. I didn't hate it, and I would definitely say to watch it again. But if I'm looking for a show like this, I would recommend Dark Matter on Apple TV before I would recommend this. But if you've already watched Dark Matter, I would say go ahead and check out Bodies because it's pretty solid. It's on Netflix. I think it's a Netflix original. From what I can see, there's no point in there being a second season. I
Yeah.
feel like it ended its story, so it is a one-off. So you could just go watch it and be done and call it good, and not have to worry about binging it for season two or anything like that.
Makes
But
sense.
yeah, but all in all, I mean, it's decent, not mind-blowing, but decent. And like I said, the acting and directing is great. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Love that.
all right. So
How long did it take you to finish it, Kevin?
it's 8 episodes.
From start to
They're
finish?
all 45 minutes to an hour, I think. And I
Okay.
mean, I did it this last week. So
Gotcha.
um, I think I did a couple episodes a day and
Sure.
got through it pretty quick. So yeah, it's very watchable. And like I said, it pulls you in enough that it moves it. The episodes did feel a little long. I
Hmm.
noticed that actually these didn't feel as long. Supercell, which I talked about earlier, that one for some reason, same length. Those episodes felt like movies. They felt really long, but not in a bad way. They just felt longer than they
Right.
were.
A lot happened.
Yeah,
So are they going to make a second season of this, or did they set it up where it's done?
bodies. I feel like is done. There's
Okay,
they resolve everything they need to resolve.
sure.
I- If they did a second season, it would have. I feel like it'd have to be a completely different story. Uh,
Got it.
so so neat premise that works once. It doesn't have to be redone. So it's
Yeah.
good in that regard. I think the British are really good about that, anyways. They kind
Yeah,
of keep their
they know
television
when to
tight.
stop.
Yeah, yeah. They always have. Like that's always been my thing with British television. They're like, here we made a one season show that's 6 episodes. Go watch it. And they were doing this long before Americans were streaming.
Right.
So yeah. So, anyways, yeah, definitely give it a shot if you don't have anything else to watch. It's a solid mystery. The last thing you have is Brooklyn.
Brooklyn came out in 2015. If you want to see a very good film about your European immigrants and excuse me, immigration, early 1900s, definitely give it a whirl. It takes place, I believe, in like the 1950s. Yeah,
Mhm.
it navigates through the 1950s. It stars Saoirse Ronan, who plays Eilish, who is a young Irish immigrant who gets the opportunity to come to America, and she leaves behind her mom and her older sister. And as she comes to Brooklyn, you get to see the journey she makes into Ellis Island, which is really cool. And she stays at like a boarding house with other British women, excuse me, Irish women, and like a head of the house, like this Irish woman. And through the church, she gets work at like this very high-end department store in Manhattan, gets to mingle with other Irish people, and it showcases how a lot of these immigrants had their own like pockets of where they came from. So they had all
Mhm.
the Italians together, all the Jews together, all of the Irish people together. And she at first is incredibly homesick and hates it there. And then she starts enjoying her job and meeting new people. And she then gets to meet Tony, who is an Italian guy who goes to Irish dances, and they had dances back then so that you can meet your soulmate or meet your husband, wife from your same national background. So she ends up meeting Tony. She goes to night school to become an accountant, and she falls in love with this guy, and everything is going really well. And he introduces her to his family, and then she gets like a really sudden horrible call that her older sister passes away suddenly. So she goes to back to Ireland, and her mother is, elderly and is like all alone, and she gets to reconnect with one of her best friends. And she realizes like, all right, I'll just be away for like a week or two to go to see my sister get buried and go to her funeral, and or at least even after the funeral get to see her grave and be with my mom for a couple of days, etc. And then she finds out her best friend is married or is getting married, so her best friend wants her to stay in Ireland to be a part of the wedding. So she's kind of just like in a bit of a pickle because she really finally found herself in America. She found the love of her life, this Italian man. She ends up marrying him before she goes back in secrecy. They get married at a courthouse. And then she goes back to Ireland, doesn't tell her mom about it. And the longer she's there, the more she realizes people are trying to convince her to stay. And she has a lot of guilt because her mom's all by herself and her sister passed away. And then they introduce her to an Irish man who happens to be single, and he takes a great liking to Eilish, and she likes him too. But I think deep down she's like, I really belong back in America with Tony. So she has to make a decision whether or not to stay or leave. But it's a really good story. It gives you a nice picture of like what immigration looked like in, 1950s, and sort of the trials and tribulations that someone from Europe that immigrates to the US had to go through in order to build a life for themselves. So highly recommended, very good acting. It's a fun film. It's a good love story.
Is it pretty
It's got all,
lighthearted? Like it
I
sounded
think
kind of
so.
dramatic, but um, I really like Saoirse Ronan. I think she is slept on
Yeah.
as an actress. Not necessarily slept on. I think people know, but she just people don't talk about her, or maybe she just doesn't
Hmm.
do enough right now.
Yeah.
She's not as big as she probably should be. I think talent wise, people talk about how great she is, but like
Yeah.
um her roster isn't so high. The cast in this is cool. I like Domhnall Gleeson. I assume he's probably the Irish guy that they try to hook her up with. Jim.
Yep, Jim.
And then Father Flood is played by Jim Broadbent, who is the not the ringmaster, but whatever that job is at Moulin Rouge in the Moulin Rouge movie.
Oh,
Um,
that's him?
yeah, yep,
Oh, that's so funny. He plays a priest and he plays like the ringmaster of the very
yeah.
scandalous club.
He's a
That's
fun actor. I
hysterical.
really like him. I've seen him in a few things, and he's really great. So, um,
Cool.
yeah, great cast. Like I said, Saoirse Ronan is fantastic. Rotten Tomatoes has got a 97% from the critics and 87% from the audience.
It
So it's
was really great.
really good.
It's a one of those films. It's like if you just want to have like a nice night with your significant other and watch like a really nice love story and also just learning about, and it's not a romantic comedy at all. It's just one of those like, love stories from the early 1900s and you see this young woman find herself and build herself a life once she immigrates to the US. It's good.
Yeah. Have you ever seen Ragtime? Musical
I have
Ragtime?
not.
That's about immigration in the at the turn of the century. So I
Hmm.
think the show literally opens in 1900, like day one of 1900.
Oh wow. Okay.
Um, and that one's interesting because you've got um, a Jewish immigrant. You have
Hmm.
the existing Irish community. I don't think they talk about Irish immigration. And then you have the black neighborhoods that are lower class black neighborhoods, and then
Right.
the rich white folks, and it all takes place in New York. It's a
Hmm.
musical. Unfortunately, they haven't ever filmed it as a movie. I think there is a movie version of it because it's based on a book, but it's not the same. But the musical is amazing, and the only reason it didn't win best best musical at the Tonys that year is because stupid Lion King came out the same year, which is great. I actually love the Lion King. I
Yeah,
love
it's
that
a
they
classic, Kevin. Don't
yeah.
hate on the
Well, I
classics.
love that they
Yeah,
redid all the music for the Lion King, so it's all
it's
really
fantastic.
African, and the sets and costumes are amazing and everything. But Ragtime is was better. It
Ragtime the
should have won.
movie came out in 1981.
Yeah, and I assume the story's the same. I think there's a few things in the movie that probably aren't in the musical, because it's a little
Oh,
adult. It's based on a book, and the book is supposed to be really great. Um,
gotcha,
but the
gotcha, gotcha.
musical, if I'm sure it's on Apple Music or something, is worth listening to. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. So,
Awesome.
um,
No, that's good to know.
yeah, just thinking
Good
about
rec,
immigration stories, I thought I'd throw that one out there. Um,
for sure.
I
Yeah,
don't.
definitely give Brooklyn a try, especially if you want to see like a young Saoirse Ronan, since she's been in so many films, I'd say within the
Yeah, she's been in a
past,
lot
what,
more
like
since, right?
5 years.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And she's getting a lot of, I mean, she's been nominated at least two or three times for the Oscars.
yeah.
So give her a try
All right.
and definitely give it a watch. It's a good film. It's a good feeling film. I think so.
And for anybody want to watch that one, that one's on HBO right now.
It is on
Um,
HBO. That's
yeah.
correct.
So, all right. Well, I will close out the show by finally talking about the show movie behind me. Abigail just dropped on Paramount Plus on Friday, and I would have seen this in the theater because I loved the trailers. It looked like a lot of fun. It is a vampire flick. I think it has a very tight cast. It's only nine members in the cast. A couple of them are only in for a few minutes. Giancarlo Esposito is in it, but he literally is in it for 5 minutes, maybe. Um, I think it's the last thing that Angus Cloud worked on
Yeah.
from
Euphoria.
yeah, from Euphoria. He's funny in it. Like it's really. just knowing what happens, it's a little more sad, but he's a lot of fun in it. It's got two kind of modern scream queens right now, and Catherine Newton, who's done a couple of good horror flicks, and then
Yep.
Melissa Barrera, who did two Scream movies. And
She's
then
also in the Heights.
okay, yeah, yeah. And then Dan Stevens from we talked about him. He was in the Kong movie a couple weeks ago, but he's also, very famous for Downton Abbey.
Hmm.
Kevin Durand, who was on Lost, he's not a big name, but he's a lot of fun as an actor. But the gist of this movie is this group of criminals gets hired to kidnap this little girl, and they kidnap her after she gets home from this little ballet performance she does.
Hmm.
And they kidnap her and they bring her back to this house where Giancarlo Esposito greets them and is like, "Hey, you just gotta, you guys gonna have to stay with her overnight. When they come to pick her up, you'll get paid." So they all stay, and as the story moves on, we find out what we already know from the trailers is that they ultimately get trapped in this house, and the little girl is a vampire.
Joey,
Yeah.
I'm sorry about what's gonna happen to you.
And so now it's all about she wants to eat them all, right? And it takes a little while to go there. Now, there are actually some really fun, like background story bits that make it a little deeper than that.
Hmm.
She's not just a monster that eats people, like she is a little girl with a dad vampire, and she's got dad vampire issues, and it's it's a really fun horror movie because it is kind of funny, but it's not silly. But there's a lot of jokes in it, and the girl is fantastic. Like she is so good.
What can I say? I like playing with my food.
Um, like because she has to. I think playing a vampire is really hard as a kid because in a lot of cases, vampires, the whole point of
Hmm.
them is they've been around for a long time. So even though she looks, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, whatever she is, she's 100 years old,
Hmm.
she's been through a lot of stuff.
Sure.
And she's just, man, she is so good. She's so good at being scary. She's so good at being like a cute little kid when she's trying to play as a cute little kid. Like,
Right.
she's just she really makes the movie. I mean, everybody's great in it. Melissa Barrera is really great. She goes through it really well. They go through all this. Um, but what you come to find out is everybody, they're all criminals, but
Hmm.
kind of like Supercell, we find out they're all tied together in one way or another. And the way
So
this
they're
go,
set up, it sounds
yeah,
like.
it's definitely a setup. And one of the things that they do in the movie early on, there's a movie called Reservoir Dogs that was directed by Quentin Tarantino a long time ago. And in Reservoir Dogs, everybody's name is Mr. Pink, Mr. Red, Mr. Because that way they don't have to use their real names.
Sure.
When they show up to this house, nobody knows anybody's names, so Giancarlo gives them names
Pseudonames.
from the Brat Pack. So you've got
Interesting.
no, not the Brat Pack, the Rat Pack, the actual Rat Pack. So Frank, Sammy, Dean, Joey, Peter. Uh, so and then there's the one big black guy. He doesn't know what to call him, so he calls him Don Rickles. Um, and but it's like it, it's just a
Funny.
really fun horror movie. Like it's definitely got its share of gory moments. Like it's a
Yeah.
vampire movie, so your vampire kills have to be big and exciting and all of that. And then
Hmm.
on the flip side of it, when she eats somebody or whatever, that's got to be brutal in its own way.
Sure. Does she know
Um,
she's a vampire, the girl, or is it almost
yes,
like she's
yes,
like she
100%. Like, and what's really fun is in the beginning, she totally plays the victim, like she's just being all sweet and cute and talking to them. And then I'm pretty sure they show this in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler. But at one point, everybody's in the
right,
room and they're trying to figure out what's going on, and she just like slips off the handcuffs and just goes berserk. And the more the movie goes on, she starts to act crazier and crazier. Like she starts like
right.
because she's in a little tutu, she starts ballerina dancing around as she's like killing people. And I mean,
It's
I
wild.
can't get over how great she is in this part, because she's just a kid. Like she's what does it say she is on IMDb? She was born in 2009, so she's 15. She's not even 15
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
And I mean, when she's on and when she's really playing it up, like she eats up the screen. She's fantastic, which is impressive because she's on
So young.
screen with some really talented people.
Yeah.
Catherine Newton is hilarious. Like she is a little different than she usually does. She usually plays kind of smart and sassy,
Yeah.
and in this she's kind of ditzy and just kind of flighty and fun. Like I said, Angus Cloud is like a total stoner, and he, I mean,
That makes sense.
yeah, he is funny. He's so funny. Um,
Yeah.
Dan Stevens is like a former cop who is obviously a little shady. And he's a little greasy and a little slimy, totally the opposite of Downton Abbey. And
Hmm.
then, Melissa Barrera is probably the closest like to previous roles than any other actor in it.
Hmm.
Where she feels very similar to her character from Scream, but not in a bad way. Like she plays it really well, and she does a really fantastic job. She is, other than Little Girl, probably the biggest, like gets the most screen time. Like she's the closest thing you have to another main character. Um,
Hmm.
and it's just, I mean, it's just really good and really fun. If horror movies are your jam, if you like horror movies, you don't mind the gore. I don't think it's so suspenseful, not like a
Because
Conjuring or
you
something like
know,
that. Yeah, it just is what it is. It's just a horror movie with a monster that's trying to eat everybody. And um it's not like a Friday the 13th where it's this slow brooding, like um you know rambling monster. She's crazy and she's fun and like she's got a dirty mouth. Like she swears. Like everything she does is just so funny and fantastic.
right.
And I think, yeah, if you like horror films, it's great. It's not, like I said, it's not it's not a horror movie that you're gonna walk away from and have nightmares about. I don't think. Like it's not gonna stick with you like some
Yeah.
of these other things. Like people are talking about Long Legs, which is out there right now, which was like super supposed to be super disturbing. I wish I could see I wish I was going to go see it, but I'll wait for it to stream and
Hmm.
catch it then. I would think, um in a way, Split is probably more intense than this is.
Yeah.
um this would be more violent than Split.
Sure.
But if you watch the trailer, really most of the story is right there. Like there's no surprises really coming out of it. So it's just kind of a fun story about a little vampire girl that is kind of adorable and kind of psycho. Um, but I definitely like I said, if this is your jam, I 100% recommend it. It was a ton of fun. I think it crushed it on Rotten Tomatoes, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was pretty high.
82 from the critics, 85 from the
85 from the
audience.
audience.
So pretty close.
Yeah, which is good for horror, especially. I think
Right.
that makes a big difference when you're looking at the ratings, because a lot of times horror can kind of go up and down and all over the place. So
Definitely.
yeah, so I definitely recommend it. It's a lot of fun, um, bloody and violent, but if you're okay with that, it's super
Then
entertaining.
you'd be fine.
Yeah,
Cool.
so cool. Well, that's everything we have. So it's a shorter episode, which I think is fine. We ate up a ton of time last week.
We did.
Um, and so I will. You're out next week.
I'm out
Andrew's
next
out
week.
next week. So it'll probably just be me, which works. I'm trying to work out something to do for that, with it being just me. And I think I'm going to try and see Deadpool and Wolverine before I record. That comes out next weekend. So
Cool.
I'll talk about that, and we'll go from there. So to everybody watching or listening, I will say thank you and have a great week, and we will see you next time.